Can you imagine one of sport's most iconic legends making a desperate call in the dead of night, pleading for help? At 2:18 a.m. on a frigid Tuesday, Michael Jordan received a call that would forever alter two lives. On the other end of the line was Shaquille O'Neal, a four-time NBA champion, yet something was profoundly wrong. The 7-foot 1-inch giant who once dominated courts worldwide now sounded like a man utterly shattered. But what had truly transpired with Shaquille O'Neal? How had one of basketball's most cherished figures reached the point of contemplating forsaking everything he held dear? And why would Michael Jordan, his erstwhile formidable rival, be the sole individual in the world capable of comprehending his anguish? Today, you will unearth the untold story of how a cryptic late-night phone call ignited the most improbable friendship and the most profound transformation ever witnessed in the world of sports. A story of pride, downfall, redemption, and the courage to admit that even giants need help. Brace yourself for a journey that transcends the confines of basketball. The deathly silence of the Spectrum Center was shattered by the piercing ring of the telephone, which reverberated through the empty walls of the executive suite like a desperate cry in the frigid pre-dawn darkness of Charlotte. Michael Jordan, at 62, was hunched over his massive mahogany desk, engrossed in Charlotte Hornets financial reports that spread before him like a sea of figures and charts, each page representing millions of dollars in decisions that would impact hundreds of lives. The fluorescent lights cast deep shadows on his time-worn face, revealing the furrows that decades of pressure, responsibility, and fierce competition had sculpted around his piercing eyes that had once intimidated the world's greatest players. His fingers, still long and agile despite his advanced age, drummed nervously on the desk as he analyzed the team's performance data, his mind perpetually calculating, perpetually seeking the perfection that had made him an immortal legend of global basketball. The office, adorned with gleaming trophies and photographs of glorious moments, seemed even more vast and desolate in the early hours of the morning, when only the phantoms of past triumphs kept company with the man once considered the greatest basketball player of all time. When he saw the name on the corporate phone's display, his brows furrowed in instant confusion and concern. Jordan said icily into the phone, "Shaq? What the hell? It's 2 in the morning, man." A chill ran down the executive's spine. Something is gravely wrong here, and Shaq never calls at this hour. From the other end of the line, a muffled sob breached the pre-dawn silence like a dagger slicing through the frigid air, carrying an emotional charge that instantly sent shivers down Jordan's spine. The voice he had always known as strong, confident, full of life, and capable of filling any room with its infectious energy, now quavered like that of a child lost in the dark, each word laden with a pain that seemed to tear the basketball titan's soul into microscopic fragments. Shaquille O'Neal, the man who had dominated courts worldwide with his imposing 7'1" presence and magnetic personality that captivated crowds, now sounded small, fragile, utterly shattered by forces Jordan could not yet fully comprehend. The executive could hear his friend's ragged breathing over the line, punctuated by deep, guttural sighs that betrayed a devastating internal struggle, as though Shaquille was literally grappling to articulate each word. Shaq's shattered voice reverberated through the empty office like a visceral cry for help that pierced directly through the Hornets' owner's heart, causing him to utterly disregard the financial reports that had seconds earlier consumed his undivided attention. Jordan had heard many fractured voices throughout his executive career, players grappling with devastating injuries, personal tribulations, or crises of confidence, but he had never before encountered anything as profoundly unsettling as the raw despair that emanated from every syllable uttered by his former rival. Shaq muttered through tears that Jordan could almost sense through the receiver, "MJ, I need to see you. Now I can't do this anymore, man. I can't bear this weight alone any longer." A wave of alarm washed over Jordan as his hand tightened around the receiver. "In 3 decades, I've never witnessed Diesel in such a state, not even during the nadir of his storied career." Jordan sat bolt upright in his Italian executive leather chair, his tall, still athletic frame assuming the posture of acute alertness that had made him legendary on the courts. every muscle coiling as though bracing himself for the most formidable adversary of his life. His muscles involuntarily contracted, an automatic physiological response honed over decades of competing at the zenith of professional sports, as his indefatigable competitor's mind began to process the sheer gravity of the unfolding situation before him. In 3 decades of intimately knowing Shaquille O'Neal, from the traumatic era when the nascent Orlando Magic Center had humiliatingly ousted them in the 1995 playoffs, thereby sowing the seeds of the motivation that would propel him to a historic 72 wins the following season, he had never before heard such devastating fragility in the voice of the behemoth who had become a force of nature on the hardwood. It was as if all the physical and mental fortitude that had forged Shaq into one of basketball's greatest players had been utterly siphoned away by some unseen, relentless force, leaving only a broken man pleading for succor amidst the deepest gloom. Jordan felt his hands tremble slightly, a physical reaction he hadn't experienced since his active playing days, when the pressure of decisive playoff moments tested even his legendary icy composure, which had become mythical among fans and adversaries alike. The shock of hearing Shaquille in such a state was akin to witnessing Superman lose his powers, or watching a mountain crumble before his very eyes. Jordan inquired, his voice taut with effort to maintain composure. "Shaq, for God's sake, what in the world is happening to you? Are you injured? Has someone passed away?" The Hornets owner murmured to himself with mounting concern. "I've never heard you like this, big man, not even when you lost finals or faced heavy criticism." Shaquille's reply came as an emotional avalanche of pain and despair that struck Jordan with brutal force, each word laden with the burden of months, perhaps years, of pent-up suffering that had finally overflowed. "No, MJ, I'm anything but all right. I'm far from it. I'm utterly ruined as a person and as a professional. The internet, the fans, everyone hates me now with a vehemence I've never witnessed before. They say I'm a bitter, resentful old man who only knows how to tear down the young guys, who humiliated young talents because I can't accept that my time has passed, that I'm toxic to basketball, that I'm poisoning the sport I love more than anything in life," Shaq choked out, each word emerging as a groan of agony that laid bare the oceanic depth of his emotional suffering. Jordan could vividly picture Shaq's usually jovial and confident face contorted by the most intense pain, his striking, familiar features disfigured by an anguish that consumed him like a devastating fire. The background noise suggested Shaq was in a bustling location, likely a crowded airport even at that ungodly hour. Yet his voice seemed to emanate from a far darker, more isolated place, as if he were crying out from within an emotional chasm that had opened up beneath his feet. It was evident that every social media critique, every negative comment, every cruel meme had accumulated like heavy stones into an unrelenting mountain of rejection that had finally collapsed entirely upon the former player's broad shoulders, crushing him under a weight that not even his legendary physical might could withstand. Shaq spoke, his voice utterly fractured by emotion. "They're right, Jordan. I have become precisely everything I once criticized in bitter veterans when I was young." The giant pleaded with sheer desperation. "I need to speak with you in person. You are the only person in this world who can understand what I'm going through. Please, MJ." Jordan felt a pang in his chest that instantly brought to mind the darkest and most arduous moments of his own career, when the crushing weight of impossible expectations and relentless criticism literally threatened to obliterate him under a pressure few human beings could fathom or endure. This was Shaquille O'Neal, a 4-time NBA champion, 15-time All-Star, lifetime Hall of Famer, one of the most beloved and revered figures in global sports, possessing a personality that had transcended basketball to become a global cultural icon, now pleading for help in the dead of night like a man literally on the precipice of the deepest emotional abyss. Jordan was intimately acquainted with the devastating pressure that came with global fame and success at the highest echelon. He had experienced firsthand how the entire world could turn on you in a matter of days or even hours, transforming blind adoration into visceral hatred with a cruel and utterly relentless speed that could shatter weaker minds. But hearing Shaquille, always so physically robust and emotionally resilient, reduced to this state of absolute vulnerability and utter despair, stirred something profoundly primal within the Hornets' executive's soul. It was as if he were seeing a distorted and terrifying reflection of himself, a dark, alternate version where he had completely succumbed to external pressures instead of finding the strength to overcome them and transmute them into fuel for even greater grandeur. Jordan asked with burgeoning urgency and genuine concern, "Where exactly are you at this moment, Shaq?" The executive thought with iron resolve, "I will help this man climb out of this hole, whatever the cost and however long it takes." Shaq's reply was laden with an existential despair that made each word sound like a desperate last gasp of hope amidst the profoundest darkness. At Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, awaiting the next available flight to Charlotte, I'm sitting here alone in the middle of the crowd, MJ, and I feel invisible, as if I've already died inside. I don't know who I am anymore, man. I look in the mirror and see a stranger I don't recognize. Someone who has become everything I've always despised, the giant stated, his voice echoing through the terminal walls like a lost, melancholic echo of his former grandeur that once illuminated courts worldwide. Jordan could envision the devastating scene with crystalline clarity. Shaquille O'Neal, his imposing physical presence of over 7 feet always commanding immediate attention and reverence wherever he went, now slumped alone in some dark, forgotten corner of the world's busiest airport, desperately attempting to conceal himself from the world that once adored him as a sports deity. The irony of the situation was utterly devastating and cruel. A man who had spent his entire life naturally at the epicenter of positive attention, now desperate to utterly vanish, to find a place where he could exist without the crushing weight of impossible expectations and unrelenting judgments from millions. Jordan knew Shaq had flown from Atlanta to Charlotte countless times over the years, for games, events, social gatherings, but never under such desperate and somber circumstances, never fleeing himself in such a dramatic and painfully human manner. Shaq whispered with childlike vulnerability, "I don't recognize the man in the mirror anymore, MJ. It's as if my soul has been ripped from my body." Jordan replied with paternal resolve and unwavering determination, "You're coming here right now, Diesel. We're going to fix this together, just as we've always resolved our problems." Jordan rose from his chair as if struck by a bolt of pure energy, his silhouette still imposing and formidable even at 62 years of age, majestically projected against the panoramic windows that offered a breathtaking vista of Charlotte slumbering beneath the star-dusted mantle of dawn. His eyes, still as penetrating and resolute as in the glorious days when he dominated NBA courts, gleamed with a fierce intensity he hadn't displayed in years, as though the monumental challenge of saving a friend in profound crisis had instantly reignited the legendary competitive fire that had made him an unstoppable force of nature. He began to pace his office with measured and deliberate strides, his mind already operating like a high-speed supercomputer, meticulously calculating every necessary maneuver to extricate Shaquille from the devastating emotional chasm into which he had plunged without warning. Jordan knew better than anyone alive how ruthless and cruel modern media and social networks could be, how a beloved hero could be transmuted into a reviled villain overnight without any genuine justification, and how the profound solitude that inevitably accompanied global renown could consume and annihilate even the most robust and resilient spirits. He had traversed his own harrowing periods of utter desolation, solitary instances when he questioned every facet of himself, his identity, his purpose, his intrinsic worth as a human being, and now possessed the singular and invaluable opportunity to leverage that painful yet invaluable experience to salvage a man he had always held in profound esteem, even when they were fierce and relentless rivals on the courts. Jordan said, gazing out the window at the hushed city, "Irrespective of what has transpired over the past weeks or months, Shaq, we will navigate this together," the executive murmured with a familiar resolve, reminiscent of bygone days. "It's time to demonstrate that true legends stand by one another during their darkest hours." As he anxiously awaited Shaquille's arrival, Jordan remained restive in his opulent office. The meticulous financial reports of the Hornets now seemed utterly inconsequential and negligible In the face of the profound human crisis he was poised to confront with the full weight of his accumulated experience and wisdom. He knew instinctively that the forthcoming hours would be absolutely pivotal for his friend's future, that he would have to not only unearth the right words, but also the impeccable emotional approach to draw Shaquille back from the emotional chasm where he had descended. The burden of responsibility settled upon his broad shoulders like a familiar yet intense weight. It was precisely the same sensation he experienced during the most decisive moments of playoff games, when literally everything hinged on his innate leadership acumen, unyielding determination, and knack for devising solutions where others perceived only insurmountable obstacles. Jordan's gaze slowly swept across the gleaming trophies and historic photographs adorning his office, which stood as monuments to a legendary career. He recalled all the epic battles he had won, every seemingly insurmountable obstacle he had overcome through sheer force of will, and he felt a quiet yet potent conviction burgeon within his chest that he could make a fundamental difference in Shaquille's life. After all, true, enduring champions are not merely defined by their spectacular personal triumphs, but primarily by their capacity to uplift other human beings when they are most in need of aid and hope. As Jordan contemplated the nascent dawn, he mused to himself, "If I manage to weather every storm I've faced, I can certainly help Shaq weather his too." With unwavering resolve, the executive concluded, "Dawn will break in a few hours, and when it does, he will no longer face this battle alone." Jordan arrived at the small, 24-hour diner precisely as the first golden rays of dawn began to filter through the windows, slightly fogged by the steam of hot coffee, creating an almost cinematic ambiance within the welcoming interior of the Waffle House. The archetypal American establishment, with its worn red vinyl booths and gleaming formica counter, was precisely the sort of venue where significant conversations transpired. Far from the relentless glare of fame, where real people could afford vulnerability without fear of cameras or clandestine recordings. The comforting aroma of fresh waffles, crisp bacon, and strong coffee permeated the morning air, mingling with the subdued murmur of other early patrons. Truckers taking a respite, night shift workers concluding their shifts, and a few individuals who, like them, sought solace in the unpretentious simplicity of a place where no one delved too deeply into private matters. Jordan found Shaquille precisely where he anticipated. Alone in the diner's darkest, most secluded corner, a man of 7 feet, 1 inch literally attempting to conceal himself from the world that had once celebrated him as a gentle giant. Shaq's red, swollen eyes betrayed an entire night of sleeplessness and tears, his facial expression disclosing the emotional exhaustion of someone who had waged a devastating internal battle for hours on end. With a voice hoarse and vulnerable, Shaq uttered, "Thank you for coming, MJ. I know it's utterly mad for me to be in a place like this at 5:30 in the morning, but," Jordan replied with paternal firmness, "cut that out and sit up straight. Now tell me everything that's going on. Don't leave out a single detail." Jordan settled onto the vinyl bench across from the giant, his piercing eyes scrutinizing every nuance of Shaquille's facial expression with the same analytical intensity he had once used to dissect the strategies of the most formidable opponents in the NBA Finals. The contrast between the two men was stark even in that unassuming setting. Jordan, always impeccably dressed, even in a casual situation like this, maintained an erect and confident posture that exuded natural authority, while Shaq seemed to have shrunk into his baggy clothes, as if attempting to physically vanish from the world. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and a warm, quintessential Southern smile, approached unobtrusively to serve fresh coffee, but Jordan made a subtle hand gesture indicating they required absolute privacy for a conversation that could alter the course of his friend's life. Steam from the freshly poured coffee created wisps between them, like an ethereal curtain separating two worlds. Jordan's, who had learned to navigate the turbulent waters of fame with relative success, and Shaq's, who was drowning in those very waters that had once been his source of joy and personal fulfillment. Shaq took several deep breaths, his enormous hands visibly trembling as he clutched the coffee cup as if it were an anchor amidst an emotional tempest. "Do you perfectly remember when we were fierce rivals on the court, MJ? Especially in '95, When my Orlando Magic knocked you out of the playoffs and I thought I had conquered the entire world? The Giant continued with poignant nostalgia. And then you came back in '96 like a man possessed, utterly decimating us with those historic 72 wins. That taught me the most important lesson of my life, that true greatness lies in how you respond to falling, not in never falling. Jordan nodded slowly, his mind instantly transported back to those intense and emotionally charged days, recalling with crystal clarity the acute pain of that unexpected elimination and the fierce, almost obsessive determination that had seized every fiber of his being during the ensuing months. He could vividly recall the profound humiliation he had endured during those bleak days of May 1995, when a young Shaquille O'Neal had starkly demonstrated to the world that Michael Jordan might no longer be invincible, that his era of absolute dominance might be drawing to a premature and unforeseen close. Yet that devastating defeat had sown the seeds of something far grander and more potent, an insatiable hunger for redemption that propelled him to train with a singular, almost possessed intensity throughout the summer, transmuting every critique, every lingering doubt, every questioning of his future into pure fuel for a vengeance to be served ice cold the ensuing season. The 72-win season had not merely been about basketball. It had been about proving to himself and to the world that true greatness is not measured by an absence of defeats, but by the capacity to transform those setbacks into the impetus to ascend to even greater heights. Jordan looked directly into Shaq's bloodshot eyes and discerned reflections of the very same pain he himself had experienced decades prior. Jordan stated with escalating intensity, "That elimination was the best thing that ever happened to me, Shaq, because it compelled me to evolve beyond my own perceived limits." The executive, now pensive, continued, "But that's in the past, Giant. What you're experiencing now is different, and I need to understand every detail to be able to assist you." Shaquille's subsequent words erupted like an emotional avalanche that had been dammed up for months, each utterance laden with a profound anguish that caused his voice to quaver with escalating intensity. "Yet now, Jordan, after all these years striving for relevance in my post-playing career, I have become precisely what I always swore I never would, the villain of the narrative, the embittered veteran who doesn't know when to cease his pronouncements. Every critique I deliver on TNT's Inside the NBA program immediately goes viral across social media, yet for entirely the wrong reasons. It's not for the wisdom I endeavor to impart or the experience I've amassed over decades in the sport, but because fans perceive me as a resentful, bitter behemoth actively seeking to dismantle the dreams and confidence of the young players striving to forge their own careers." Shaq paused to take a sip of coffee, his hands still trembling ever so slightly, before continuing in an increasingly faltering voice. "Social media is literally ablaze with demands for my immediate dismissal from TNT, with hashtags like Shaq Out and Toxic Shaq trending daily on Twitter. The comments are devastating, MJ. They no longer see me as the Shaq they love to watch play, but as a toxic dinosaur poisoning the very sport it should be celebrating." Genuine tears began to slowly trace down the Giant's weathered face, creating glistening tracks that caught the soft morning light filtering through the restaurant windows. Shaq said in an utterly broken voice, "I want to give up on absolutely everything, man. Quit TNT, vanish completely from basketball, live in total anonymity far from the limelight." The Giant concluded, utterly devastated, "Because maybe they're right about me. Maybe I really am just a bitter old man who doesn't know when to cease talking and accept that his time has passed." Shaquille's raw, unvarnished vulnerability hit Jordan like a gut punch, instantly reminding him of his own darkest moments as owner of the Charlotte Hornets, when every decision he made was relentlessly dissected by the sports media and by fans who expected him to possess the same executive genius he had displayed as a player. Jordan leaned forward across the table, bridging the physical distance between them to create an atmosphere of intimacy and trust that would allow for a profoundly candid conversation, his voice assuming the firm yet genuinely emotive tone he had used in locker rooms during the most crucial moments of his career as a leader. "Now listen very carefully, Diesel, and listen with every ounce of attention you can muster right now. Do you really think I've never gone through precisely what you're grappling with now? Do you think becoming an NBA franchise owner was a seamless and natural transition for me? That every decision I make as the Hornets owner isn't immediately lambasted, dissected from every conceivable angle, reviled by a significant portion of fans who believe I should have simply remained a retired legend? Jordan paused strategically, allowing his words to penetrate Shaq's tormented mind before continuing with even greater intensity. The fundamental difference between succumbing to such criticism and leveraging it as fuel for growth is a lesson that took me years to fully grasp. Our responsibility as sports legends is not to be flawless in everything we do, because that is literally impossible. Our responsibility is to be consistently better than we were yesterday and to help others do the same. Jordan declared with iron conviction, "You possess a natural gift that I never had throughout my entire career, Shaq. People genuinely love you. They don't merely respect you." The executive continued intensely. "They desperately want you to be better because they see in you a true hero, not a villain. Do not squander this unique connection due to temporary social media noise." Shaq's swollen, red eyes met Jordan's determined gaze directly, forging a moment of profound human connection that transcended their public personas and reduced them simply to two men who had faced extraordinary pressures and now shared a mutual vulnerability. Jordan could clearly see that his words were beginning to pierce the armor of despair Shaquille had constructed around himself, like small fissures of hope forming in a seemingly impenetrable wall of hopelessness. The environment around them continued its normal morning routine. The comforting sizzle of waffles on the hot griddle, the low hum of other customers' conversations, the gentle clinking of silverware against plates. But for Jordan and Shaq, the world had narrowed to that Formica table where two basketball legends were navigating deep and perilous emotional waters. Jordan continued, his own emotions beginning to surface for the first time in years, revealing layers of his personality he rarely showed, even to those closest to him. "But let me tell you something that's going to shock you, Shaq. Last night, before you called, I was sitting in that very Hornets office reviewing reports that charted our 10th consecutive playoff-less season, reading devastating critiques of my executive capabilities. And for the first time in decades, I found myself contemplating whether it wouldn't be better to sell the team and vanish from public life altogether." Jordan paused, his own emotions visibly surfacing. "Tomorrow, not today, but tomorrow itself, we're going to work on this together. I will teach you absolutely everything I've learned about contending with destructive criticism, about transforming your voice into something that builds careers rather than demolishes them." The executive concluded with absolute resolve. "But first, before anything else, you need to promise me one fundamental thing. Don't give up on basketball. The sport desperately needs you, even if you can't perceive it now." Jordan leaned back slightly in the booth, his posture relaxing somewhat as he observed the conflicting emotions traversing Shaquille's face like shifting clouds during a gradually subsiding storm. He could discern that his words were sowing seeds of hope in the fertile ground of Shaq's mind, seeds that would require time and nurture to germinate, but that already displayed the first signs of life. The morning sun had brightened during their conversation, transforming the restaurant's ambiance from somber and melancholic to something more akin to hopeful and restorative, as if nature itself were conspiring to underpin that moment of healing and human reconnection. Jordan knew from personal experience that words alone were insufficient to mend deep emotional wounds, but he also knew they could be the crucial first step on a journey back to self-assurance and purpose. Observing Shaq closely, he perceived that the giant was still battling internally, but that the struggle now encompassed a spark of hope that had been absent when he had arrived at the restaurant. "Shaq, let me ask you a very direct question," Jordan said, leaning forward once more. "When you wake up in the morning and look in the mirror, what do you truly see? For what I perceive when I look at you is a man who has devoted his entire life to a sport he loves, who brought joy to millions, and who is now confronting the most formidable challenge of his existence, discerning how to continue making a positive contribution in an era fundamentally distinct from the one that propelled him to prominence." Jordan inquired, gazing directly into Shaq's eyes. "When you reflect on the boy from Newark who dreamed of playing professional basketball, Do you believe he would be proud or ashamed of the man you have become? The executive concluded provocatively, because I guarantee you one thing, that boy would never cease fighting, irrespective of what the world proclaimed about him. Jordan's final words hung in the morning air, like an existential query demanding an honest and profound response, not merely from Shaquille, but from anyone who had ever confronted the chasm between their loftiest aspirations and their most human failings. Shaq remained silent for several minutes, his gaze fixed on the coffee cup clutched between his enormous hands, as if searching for answers within the dark liquid that mirrored his own distorted reflection. Jordan respected this quietude, recognizing it as an indication that his friend was finally processing not only his words, but the fundamental inquiries into identity, purpose, and legacy that had been buried beneath layers of pain and self-recrimination. The surrounding restaurant continued its familiar morning rhythm, yet their table had transmuted into a temporary sanctuary where two sporting legends were reevaluating not merely their perspectives on criticism and setbacks, but on what it truly meant to be great in an era where greatness was continually redefined by external voices. When Shaq finally lifted his gaze, Jordan observed something that had been absent when they first sat down. A spark of resolve that vaguely echoed the young player who had dominated courts with sheer willpower and infectious joy. Shaq uttered, his voice still fragile, yet imbued with fresh determination. "You're right about one thing, MJ. That kid from Newark would never give up, even when everyone was against him." The giant concluded with a deep sigh. "Perhaps it's time to find that kid again, even if he's buried under years of scars and disappointments." Jordan leaned back slightly in the booth, his posture relaxing somewhat as he observed the conflicting emotions traversing Shaquille's face like shifting clouds during a gradually subsiding storm. He could discern that his words were sowing seeds of hope in the fertile ground of Shaq's mind, seeds that would require time and nurture to germinate, but that already displayed the first signs of life. The morning sun had brightened during their conversation, transforming the restaurant's ambiance from somber and melancholic to something more akin to hopeful and restorative, as if nature itself were conspiring to underpin that moment of healing and human reconnection. Jordan knew from personal experience that words alone were insufficient to mend deep emotional wounds, but he also knew they could be the crucial first step on a journey back to self-assurance and purpose. Observing Shaq closely, he perceived that the giant was still battling internally, but that the struggle now encompassed a spark of hope that had been absent when he had arrived at the restaurant. "Shaq, let me ask you a very direct question," Jordan said, leaning forward once more. "When you wake up in the morning and look in the mirror, what do you truly see?" "For what I perceive when I look at you is a man who has devoted his entire life to a sport he loves, who brought joy to millions, and who is now confronting the most formidable challenge of his existence, discerning how to continue making a positive contribution in an era fundamentally distinct from the one that propelled him to prominence." Jordan inquired, gazing directly into Shaq's eyes. "When you reflect on the boy from Newark who dreamed of playing professional basketball, do you believe he would be proud or ashamed of the man you have become?" The executive concluded provocatively, "Because I guarantee you one thing, that boy would never cease fighting, irrespective of what the world proclaimed about him." Jordan's final words hung in the morning air, like an existential query demanding an honest and profound response, not merely from Shaquille, but from anyone who had ever confronted the chasm between their loftiest aspirations and their most human failings. Shaq remained silent for several minutes, his gaze fixed on the coffee cup clutched between his enormous hands, as if searching for answers within the dark liquid that mirrored his own distorted reflection. Jordan respected this quietude, recognizing it as an indication that his friend was finally processing not only his words, but the fundamental inquiries into identity, purpose, and legacy that had been buried beneath layers of pain and self-recrimination. The surrounding restaurant continued its familiar morning rhythm, yet their table had transmuted into a temporary sanctuary where two sporting legends were reevaluating not merely their perspectives on criticism and setbacks, but on what it truly meant to be great in an era where greatness was continually redefined by external voices. When Shaq finally lifted his gaze, Jordan observed something that had been absent when they first sat down. A spark of resolve that vaguely echoed the young player who had dominated courts with sheer willpower and infectious joy. Shaq uttered, his voice still fragile, yet imbued with fresh determination. "You're right about one thing, MJ. That kid from Newark would never give up, even when everyone was against him." The giant concluded with a deep sigh. "Perhaps it's time to find that kid again, even if he's buried under years of scars and disappointments." Following the revelatory breakfast at Waffle House, Jordan had summoned his most trusted and seasoned communications advisor, David Martinez, the 45-year-old Latino man who had skillfully guided him through the greatest communication crises of his post-retirement career as the Hornets owner. David was more than a mere employee. He was a brilliant communication strategist who had worked with elite athletes for over 2 decades, cultivating an almost legendary reputation for transforming PR nightmares into opportunities for growth and redemption. His private office in Charlotte, situated on the top floor of an upscale commercial building, was outfitted with cutting-edge technology and adorned with an elegant blend of sports trophies and professional commendations that narrated the story of a career dedicated to safeguarding and rehabilitating the image of public figures during moments of crisis. When David arrived that sunny Saturday morning, he found Jordan and Shaquille ensconced in imported leather armchairs, the atmosphere brimming with the palpable tension of 2 basketball legends on the cusp of embarking on a journey of personal and professional transformation that could entirely redefine Shaq's legacy. The room, with its walls paneled in fine wood and a breathtaking panoramic view of Charlotte, provided the perfect backdrop for serious discussions and strategic planning. Jordan said, gesturing toward the newcomer, "Shaq, I want you to meet David Martinez. He has literally saved me from myself more times than I can count or publicly admit." David replied with a professional smile, "Michael exaggerates, but it's true we've navigated some pretty turbulent waters together over the years." David Martinez settled into a third armchair, opening his ultra-thin laptop and spreading a series of meticulously organized documents across the tempered glass coffee table that separated the 3 men. His expertise was immediately apparent in his systematic approach to complex public image issues, always commencing with a thorough analysis of the current situation before proposing specific and measurable solutions. "Gentlemen, before we embark on any rehabilitation strategy, I need to understand precisely what the current public perception of Mr. O'Neal is and how we arrived at this critical juncture," David stated, his voice imbued with the authority of someone who had navigated similar crises involving high-profile athletes. Over the next 4 intense and productive hours, the 3 men meticulously dissected every facet of Shaq's public communication, from his appearances on Inside the NBA to his casual social media interactions, identifying patterns of behavior that had contributed to the gradual deterioration of his public image. Jordan, exhibiting a rare vulnerability, openly shared his own profound emotional scars, the costly missteps as owner of the Hornets, the scathing criticism he had received from sports media and fans alike, and crucially, how he had painstakingly learned to transform his perspective on criticism from something destructive into something constructive. It was readily apparent that Jordan was harnessing his own crucible of pain and personal growth as a veritable roadmap to shepherd Shaquille through analogous emotional landscapes. David meticulously elucidated, "Public perception is akin to a grand edifice, Shaq. It can take eons to construct, yet it can precipitously collapse within days if not meticulously maintained." Jordan interjected with palpable intensity, "And what we are endeavoring to do here today is to equip you with the essential tools to reconstruct that edifice upon a foundation more formidable than ever before." Jordan's legendary intensity, that very same ferocious energy that had propelled him to 6 NBA championships, was now wholly channeled into mentoring and molding Shaquille's communicative prowess, thereby transforming the office into an authentic crucible for leadership and impactful communication. When you publicly critique a burgeoning talent on national television, particularly on Inside the NBA, which commands an audience of millions of steadfast viewers, you are not merely addressing that singular athlete under scrutiny, Jordan elucidated, striding across the room with the very same gravitas he evinced during pivotal timeouts throughout his playing career. You are concurrently addressing millions of impressionable youths globally who venerate you as a basketball deity, as one who has ascended to the absolute zenith of athletic accomplishment. Your moral and societal onus is quite literally immense, far transcending any accountability you bore as an active player. Jordan strategically paused, allowing his pronouncements to deeply permeate Shaquille's receptive consciousness, before resuming with even greater fervor. Every pronouncement that emanates from your lips on national television possesses the profound power to inspire or to shatter dreams, to cultivate confidence or to utterly dismantle it. It is a prerogative few human beings are afforded, and with such immense power comes a concomitant responsibility that transcends mere entertainment or superficial athletic commentary. A profound silence enveloped the room as Shaq processed the true gravitas of his influence, a realization he had perhaps never fully apprehended until that profoundly revelatory juncture. Shaq articulated, imbibing every word with the alacrity of a sponge. I had never conceptualized my influence in such an expansive and profound manner. I always thought I was merely offering my candid opinion on basketball. Jordan responded with conviction. That is precisely the distinction between being merely a renowned former player and being a true legend who consistently exerts a positive influence on the sport they love. Shaquille absorbed every uttered word as if he were an eager apprentice on his first day of training, diligently taking detailed notes in a notebook David had provided, his large, meticulous handwriting reflecting the earnestness with which he was embracing that opportunity for personal and professional metamorphosis. It was captivating to observe a man who had physically dominated basketball for 2 decades, now conducting himself as a humble student, posing incisive questions and genuinely eager to acquire skills that did not come naturally to him. But how do I fundamentally alter who I am as a person and a communicator, Michael? This direct, at times blunt manner of speaking has always been my hallmark since I started playing professional basketball, Shaq inquired with a blend of genuine curiosity and apprehension about potentially sacrificing his authenticity in the process of change. People know me and expect me to be honest to the point of bluntness, to articulate what other pundits lack the courage to utter. If I completely change my way of communicating, won't I be betraying my intrinsic self? The vulnerability in Shaq's voice was palpable, revealing profound anxieties regarding identity and authenticity that many public figures contend with when compelled to evolve their public persona. David and Jordan exchanged a knowing glance, recognizing they had reached the emotional crux of the matter that demanded utmost circumspection and sensitivity. Shaq inquired with genuine vulnerability, if I alter my way of communicating, will I still be the Shaq people recognize and revere? Jordan replied with sagacity, you won't change your essence, giant. You will evolve to become the best possible version of who you've always been. Jordan positioned himself directly in front of Shaquille, his piercing gaze conveying the same intensity that had intimidated opponents for 2 decades, but now channeled for educational and inspirational ends. You don't need to fundamentally alter who you are as a person, Shaq, because your essence, your passion for basketball, your charismatic personality, your ability to connect with people, is precisely what the world needs. You need to evolve, not transmute into someone entirely different. Jordan began to walk around the room again, gesticulating with his hands to underscore his key points. I was globally renowned for being relentless on the court, for never accepting anything less than absolute perfection from myself and my teammates. Many perceived me as an authoritarian leader who governed through fear and intimidation. But over the years, especially after I became owner of the Hornets, I learned a fundamental lesson that completely reshaped my perspective on true leadership. He paused dramatically, building suspense before unveiling the most crucial lesson of his personal evolution. True, enduring leadership isn't about dominating others through force or intimidation. It's about consistently elevating those around you, inspiring them to actualize potentials they didn't even realize they possessed, and fostering an environment where excellence emerges organically through positive example, not the dread of failure. Jordan declared with growing passion, authentic leadership is about inspiring others to be better, not about perpetually proving your superiority to them. David strategically added, And this evolution in your leadership approach can be directly applied to your communication style on television and social media. David seized the opportune moment to intercede with his technical expertise, spreading across the table a series of meticulously curated examples that demonstrated how to reframe criticism constructively without relinquishing the brutal honesty that was Shaquille's distinctive hallmark. Let's work with concrete, practical examples, David stated, adjusting his spectacles and gesturing towards transcripts of Shaq's recent comments that had incited controversy on social media. The idea is not to eliminate your brutal honesty or to mold you into a bland, generic analyst. Rather, it is to layer in crucial educational context, pertinent personal experience, and, most importantly, genuine hope for the future of the players you're analyzing. David presented side-by-side examples. On one side, comments that had been perceived as destructive by fans and media, and on the other, reframed versions that retained the same honesty and insight, yet were presented in a manner that inspired growth instead of discouraging future attempts. For instance, instead of simply stating that a young player doesn't have what it takes to win in the NBA, you can say, "This young man possesses impressive raw talent, but he still needs to cultivate the winning mindset I honed through years of painful failures before finally claiming my first championship. I see the potential in him to get there, but it will demand hard work and dedication that few young players are willing to commit." The difference was subtle yet transformative. Both versions were candid about the player's shortcomings, but one offered a path to improvement, while the other merely highlighted flaws without offering hope or direction. David explained methodically, "The distinction between destructive and constructive criticism lies not in the candor of the content, but in the intent in the delivery of the message." Shaq said with dawning comprehension, "So I can retain my authenticity and honesty, but package the message in a way that inspires rather than crushes dreams." Jordan reasserted control of the conversation, his voice adopting the tone of a seasoned coach preparing a player for the biggest game of his career. "Tomorrow night, you'll go live on TNT's Inside the NBA program, and this will be your first genuine opportunity to demonstrate to the entire world that true legends can also grow, evolve, and adapt to modern times without forfeiting their fundamental essence." The pressure of the moment was palpable in the room, all three men comprehending that the next 24 hours would be crucial in determining whether Shaquille could implement everything he had absorbed during that intensive communication training session. This isn't just a chance to salvage your television career, Shaq. This is a profound opportunity to wholly redefine your legacy as a public figure, to demonstrate that true greatness encompasses the humility to acknowledge when change is necessary and the fortitude to enact those changes publicly. Jordan continued, his intensity escalating with each word. "Millions of people will be watching, many of whom are poised to witness your downfall, thereby validating their negative perceptions of you. Yet millions more will be secretly rooting for you to demonstrate that individuals can indeed evolve, mature, and transcend into superior versions of themselves." David began meticulously organizing the session's documents and notes, compiling a concise, quick reference guide for Shaq to consult prior to and during the live program. This included key phrases, reframing techniques, and salient reminders regarding tone and body language. Jordan, with compelling motivational intensity, asserted, "Tomorrow isn't merely about salvaging your TV career, Shaq. It's about demonstrating that true champions can evolve without compromising their essence." David pragmatically appended, "And we will be keenly observing, poised to support you through any challenges that may arise during or subsequent to the program." As the intensive training session drew to a close, with the late afternoon sun casting elongated shadows across the office's panoramic windows, Shaq directed his gaze toward Jordan. His expression was a complex blend of profound gratitude, renewed resolve, and a poignant vulnerability he seldom exhibited publicly. "Michael, I must be completely candid with you about something that is profoundly terrifying me," Shaq confessed, his voice laden with the weight of genuine fears he had concealed even from himself. "What if I fail spectacularly tomorrow night? What if I endeavor to apply everything I've absorbed today and still emerge as the villain of the narrative? What if I discover that I am truly incapable of change, That I am destined to perpetually remain the embittered giant who shatters aspirations instead of inspiring them. The raw vulnerability in Shaquille's voice was heartbreaking, revealing a man who had spent decades being perceived as physically and mentally invincible, now confronting the terrifying possibility that he might be unable to overcome his inherent personal flaws. Jordan stepped closer to Shaq and placed a firm hand on the giant's shoulder. A simple gesture, yet one laden with profound significance between two men who had navigated the most intense pressures professional sports could levy. Diesel, let me tell you something about failure that took me decades to fully grasp, Jordan said, his voice assuming a paternal tone few had ever witnessed. Shaq inquired with genuine apprehension. What if I publicly fail tomorrow night and prove I genuinely cannot fundamentally change who I am? Jordan retorted with steely conviction. Then you pick yourself up, learn from the mistake, and try again. How many free throws did you miss before you improved? Communication is precisely the same thing, pure practice and relentless persistence. Social media was already quite literally boiling over like a pressure cooker on the verge of exploding even before Shaquille O'Neal appeared on screen before the millions of loyal viewers of TNT's Inside the NBA program that historic Tuesday night. The hashtag #ShaqOut had surged to become the #1 worldwide trend on Twitter, with tens of thousands of enraged users demanding his immediate dismissal from the network, accompanied by cruel memes, venomous comments, and a torrent of criticism that seemed to escalate exponentially with each passing minute. Disgruntled fans, influential sports analysts, and even some former NBA players had joined the chorus of voices demanding that TNT take decisive action against what many now considered a toxic influence in the modern basketball world. Interminable Reddit threads dissected every controversial remark Shaq had made in recent weeks, fabricating a devastating narrative of a man who had entirely lost touch with reality and become an impediment to the sport's progress. In the executive offices of TNT in Atlanta, emergency meetings had been convened throughout the day, with anxious executives fiercely debating whether they should cancel Shaq's appearance on that night's program or leverage it as a final opportunity for him to publicly redeem himself. The pressure was immense, palpable, almost suffocating, creating an atmosphere of tension that permeated every corridor, every room, every conversation within the network's complex. A TNT executive nervously remarked, "If this goes awry tonight, we might be witnessing the demise of a legend's television career." Another, with palpable concern, appended, "However, should it succeed, it could be the greatest redemption story we've ever witnessed in sports television." Behind the scenes at TNT's flagship studio, in a private room specifically designated for such high-stakes moments, Jordan was on the phone with Shaquille, offering last-minute encouragement with the same intensity and laser focus he had exhibited in locker rooms during timeouts of the most pivotal games of his legendary career. His voice resonated with the natural authority of one who had navigated impossible pressures and emerged triumphant, yet also a paternal tenderness that revealed his genuine concern for his friend's emotional well-being. "Shaq, listen closely to what I'm about to tell you, because these might be the most crucial words you'll ever hear in your entire life," Jordan said, pacing restlessly around the small room as he peered through a glass window at the main studio being prepped for the live broadcast. "Remember absolutely everything we discussed yesterday. Every technique David taught you, every reformulation we practiced, every moment of vulnerability you shared with me at the Waffle House." Jordan paused strategically, allowing his words to permeate Shaquille's anxious mind before continuing with even greater fervor. "But above all, big man, be yourself. Don't try to be a fabricated version of who you think people want you to be. Be exactly who you are in your heart, but be the best possible iteration of that authentic person." On the other end of the line, Jordan could hear Shaq's heavy breathing, a mixture of extreme nervousness and burgeoning determination, reminiscent of the moments before pivotal playoff games. Jordan declared with steely conviction, "Remember what we discussed, Diesel. Be yourself, but be the quintessential version of who you are, the one residing within that colossal heart." Shaq responded in a quivering yet resolute voice, "Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself, MJ. It's time to show the world who I truly am." When the cameras promptly illuminated at 8 o'clock in the evening, cultivating that familiar yet perpetually charged atmosphere of anticipation inherent to the most watched program in American sports television, Shaquille O'Neal inhaled deeply several times, employing the anxiety management techniques David Martinez had imparted to him during their intensive training session. The studio, with its iconic decor and intimate layout that fostered the impression of friends engaging in a casual basketball discussion, had never seemed so daunting to the titan who had dominated courts worldwide for 2 decades. Ernie Johnson, the veteran and universally esteemed anchor whose calm and professional demeanor had served as the program's steadying anchor for years, commenced the broadcast as usual with his signature greeting and a recap of the evening's games. Yet everyone in the studio, Kenny Smith, Charles Barkley, the production team, and especially Shaquille, knew that this would not be a normal night of sports analysis. The tension was almost palpable, like static electricity preceding a storm, as millions of viewers worldwide awaited to see if Shaquille would either corroborate his burgeoning reputation as a toxic commentator or manage to astound everyone with a genuine metamorphosis. Mere minutes into the broadcast, when Ernie shifted the discussion to the lackluster performance of a 22-year-old young center who had endured a particularly dismal night, having missed 8 of 10 free throws in a painful defeat for his team, the moment of truth everyone had been eagerly anticipating arrived. Ernie Johnson, shifting the focus, inquired, "Shaq, you witnessed young Marcus Thompson's game tonight. 8 missed free throws and a 2-point loss. What's your assessment?" Shaq deliberated intensely. "This is the moment, big fella. Everything I've absorbed over the past 24 hours is now about to be put to the test before millions of people." Rather than his customary scathing and unsparing demeanor, which had been his contentious hallmark over the past few seasons, Shaquille paused thoughtfully for what felt like an eternity to the eager audience. He then looked directly into the main camera with a newfound intensity, one that was more mature, empathetic, and commenced speaking with an unvarnished candor that instantly captivated everyone in the studio and watching at home. "Ernie, I want to address this talented young man, Marcus Thompson, directly, and discuss something deeply personal that I rarely touch upon publicly," Shaq stated, his voice imbued with a genuine vulnerability that caught everyone completely off guard. "Yes, he botched 8 crucial free throws tonight, and that unequivocally cost his team the victory. But I must be entirely candid with you. I know precisely what that young man is experiencing at this very moment, because I endured that very predicament countless times throughout my career." Shaq leaned slightly forward, fostering a sense of intimacy even across the television screen. "For a significant portion of my career, my free throw shooting was abysmal. There were nights when I went to bed knowing I had let down my teammates, my coaches, and, most crushingly, myself, due to my utter inability to convert shots that 10-year-old children could effortlessly make." Shaq's raw candor regarding his own shortcomings forged a truly potent moment of television, utterly subverting the audience's anticipations, as they had been bracing for yet another destructive broadside against a vulnerable young player. Shaq stated, gazing directly into the camera, "But do you know what I perceive when I look at Marcus Thompson, beyond those missed free throws? I discern genuine fire, unflinching resolve. Precisely the same intangible qualities that propelled me to 4 NBA championships." The towering figure continued with escalating passion. "Marcus, if you're watching this program right now, I want you to know one thing. Your mistakes today do not define who you are as a player or as a person. The shift in tone was not merely palpable, but utterly revolutionary, sending shockwaves that instantly reverberated through the studio and beyond, reaching millions of homes where basketball fans watched with escalating incredulity the real-time transformation of one of the sport's most controversial figures. Kenny Smith and Charles Barkley, show veterans who had worked alongside Shaq for years and witnessed his most volatile eruptions, exchanged glances of genuine surprise that swiftly morphed into respectful admiration, recognizing they were witnessing something truly special and unforeseen. Ernie Johnson, with his decades-long tenure covering the sport and moderating challenging discussions, immediately recognized the historical significance of the moment and allowed Shaq to continue uninterrupted, instinctively understanding that this was a unique opportunity for authentic television that could not be squandered on commercials or topic changes. The production team, initially tense and poised to swiftly cut to commercials should Shaq launch into another destructive tirade, was now completely engrossed by the live human drama unfolding, adjusting cameras to capture every nuance of Shaquille's heartfelt facial expressions. On social media, the initial comments began to surface with disbelief. Is that truly Shaq speaking? Zrenya, where has this version of him been all these months? Am I swing? This is genuine, powerful television. The metamorphosis was occurring not merely within the studio, but in real-time public perception. Kenny Smith whispered to Charles Barkley, "In 20 years on this show, I've never seen Shaq speak like this. It's as if he's a completely different person." Charles, equally astonished, replied, "Now that's what I call real growth. This was the Shaq we always knew resided within him." Shaquille addressed the camera directly, his voice imbued with mounting power and conviction, as though he were at last discovering his authentic calling as a commentator and mentor. "Marcus, young man, if you're tuned into this program right now, and I genuinely hope you are, I want you to grasp a fundamental truth that took me years to fully internalize. Your missteps today do not dictate who you are as a player, as an individual, or as a future champion. Rather, they precisely delineate who you can become if you harness that anguish, that frustration, that disappointment as the impetus to strive harder than you ever conceived possible." Shaq strategically paused, allowing his pronouncements to resonate not merely within the young player's psyche, but across the collective consciousness of millions of viewers who were bearing witness to an impromptu masterclass in leadership and mentorship. "I have genuine faith in you, young man. I believe in your inherent talent, your unwavering work ethic, and your profound capacity to surmount this arduous period and emerge as an even more formidable and resolute player. And more critically, I yearn to witness your growth, your evolution, and your eventual realization of every aspiration you harbor in this sport that we both cherish above all else in life." The unadulterated sincerity in Shaq's voice was indisputable, striking a profound emotional chord that reverberated far beyond the realm of basketball, extending to anyone who had ever contended with public ignominy and doubted their own capacity for resurgence. It was truly transformative television, the kind of unscripted moment that forged genuine human connections across the screen. Shaq declared with absolute conviction, "I have faith in you, Marcus Thompson, and I want to see you transcend your current missteps." This is precisely what true veterans do for their young counterparts. The colossal figure mused, visibly moved. "I have at last unearthed my authentic voice. This is the persona I always aspired to embody on television." In real time, akin to an ocean tide dramatically shifting course amidst a tempest, social media platforms began to undergo a comprehensive and profound metamorphosis that astonished even the most seasoned analysts of digital media and online behavioral patterns. The vitriolic and scathing comments that had inundated Twitter, Instagram, and other platforms throughout the day swiftly gave way to unfeigned astonishment, then burgeoning admiration, and finally to something no one had foreseen: rekindled affection and profound reverence for Shaquille O'Neal. Tweets that mere minutes before had been clamoring for his immediate ouster were supplanted by messages such as, "This is the Shaq we've always loved. He's finally found his authentic vocation as a mentor. This is the pinnacle of sports broadcasting, authentic, candid, and profoundly inspiring." The hashtag #ShaqOut, which had been trending globally for hours, began to rapidly lose traction as a new hashtag, #ShaqEvolution, started to garner exponential momentum, diffusing across diverse demographics, age groups, and even among individuals who typically evinced no interest in basketball. Digital tastemakers, esteemed sports journalists, and even luminaries from other domains began to share clips of Shaq's transformative moment, creating a benevolent viral cascade that was utterly unanticipated. In the TNT offices, executives who had spent the entire day in fraught deliberations over Shaquille's future now watched in stunned disbelief as viewership metrics surged by the minute, attaining peaks the program had not witnessed in years. One Twitter user posted with palpable emotion, "The Shaq Evolution hashtag is making me tear up. This is the potency of genuine redemption unfolding live on national television. Another mused reflectively, if Shaq can evolve and transform at 52, all of us can. A beacon of genuine inspiration in an era where it is desperately needed. The program persisted for another 40 minutes after that pivotal moment, but the ambiance had utterly transmuted, creating an authentically singular television atmosphere that everyone in the studio recognized as something rare and invaluable. Kenny Smith and Charles Barkley, galvanized by their colleagues' raw display of vulnerability and profound personal growth, began to recount their own sagas of tribulation and redemption, creating a veritable symphony of authentic human experiences that elevated the program far beyond its customary purview of sports punditry. Ernie Johnson, discerning the inherent magic of the moment, allowed the discourse to unfold organically, intuitively cognizant that these were the situations that transmute television programs into enduring cultural phenomena. Sensing the positive shift in the studio's energy and the social media feedback he could surreptitiously monitor via his phone, Shaq began to unwind for the first time in months, recapturing the authentic joy he had felt in basketball, which had been overshadowed by months of controversy and self-recrimination. During commercial breaks, production crew members approached him with genuine smiles and commendations, a stark departure from the tension that had characterized their recent interactions. When the program drew to a close, viewership figures were the highest of the season, and more importantly, the general sentiment across social media had shifted from venomous hatred to inspiring hope. Ernie Johnson stated in his closing remarks, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed something truly extraordinary here on Inside the NBA. Authentic television, genuine emotion, and the transformative power of human growth." Shaq thought with a sense of profound relief, "I did it. I finally managed to be the person I always aspired to be on television." Jordan was right. I just needed to unearth the best version of myself. When the cameras finally powered down after an additional 2 minutes of airtime, necessitated by exceptional viewer engagement, Shaquille O'Neal remained seated in his chair for a few moments, processing the sheer magnitude of what had just transpired and feeling a complex admixture of profound relief, emotional gratitude, and a renewed sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. Kenny Smith was the first to approach, offering a heartfelt embrace that spoke volumes about the profound respect he had garnered from his colleagues on that landmark evening. Charles Barkley, known for his own formidable personality and often controversial opinions, simply stated, "Brother, that was authentic television. That was true leadership. That was the Shaq we always knew resided within you." Ernie Johnson, ever the consummate professional, addressed Shaq with a respectful gravitas that clearly conveyed he recognized that moment as truly exceptional in his extensive television career. The production team, initially tense and poised to manage a potential crisis, now discreetly celebrated what everyone recognized as one of the most potent and authentic moments in the program's history. In the ensuing minutes, as Shaq checked his phone, he was inundated with messages of support from basketball luminaries, celebrities, family members, and even erstwhile detractors who now acknowledged the authenticity of his transformation. Yet the message that resonated most deeply with him was a simple text from Michael Jordan. "Proud of you, big man. You just showed the world what it truly means to be a legend." Charles Barkley, with genuine admiration, remarked, "Shaq, in 2 decades of working together on television, I have never witnessed you more authentic and potent than tonight." Shaq, visibly moved, replied, "Thank you, Chuck. I feel as though I have finally discovered my true voice after years of searching in the wrong places." Within 3 weeks of that transformative evening at the TNT studios in Atlanta, rumors and conjecture surrounding Shaquille O'Neal's dramatic and seemingly improbable metamorphosis had spread like wildfire across American and international sports media, forging one of the year's most captivating and widely discussed narratives in the world of sports. Veteran journalists who had covered basketball for decades were utterly bewildered by the profound personality transformation Shaq had exhibited, not merely on that initial historic night, but consistently over the ensuing weeks, maintaining the same inspiring tenor that had captivated the world during that inaugural moment of televised redemption. Sports podcasts devoted entire episodes to the psychological dissection of Shaquille's evolution, while social media platforms teem with theories regarding the catalyst behind such a radical shift in a public figure who seemed to have crystallized into a contentious version of himself. Michael Jordan, always exceedingly selective about his media appearances and renowned for eschewing any form of gratuitous public drama, had astonished everyone by agreeing to a rare, exclusive interview on ESPN with Stephen A. Smith, specifically to address the phenomenon that had captured the imagination of basketball fans worldwide. Jordan's decision to break his habitual silence had sent shockwaves throughout the sports industry, for it was widely understood that when Michael Jordan chose to speak publicly on a matter, there was invariably a profound and significant rationale underpinning his decision. Stephen A. Smith stated, anticipating the exclusivity, "When Michael Jordan agrees to a specific interview to discuss another player, you know something extraordinary is unfolding." Jordan pondered, preparing himself. "It's time to reveal the truth about what truly transpired. Shaq deserves for the world to know the full story." The ESPN studios in Bristol, Connecticut, had never seemed so laden with anticipation and electric energy as they did that sunny February afternoon, when two of the sports world's most potent and influential personalities prepared for a conversation everyone instinctively knew would be historic and revelatory. Stephen A. Smith, known for his characteristic intensity and his prowess in eliciting memorable statements from even his most reticent interviewees, had spent days meticulously preparing for that moment, scrutinizing every nuance of Shaquille's public transformation and formulating questions designed to unveil the intricacies of this extraordinary narrative of personal redemption. Michael Jordan, donning an impeccably tailored suit that accentuated his still imposing presence at 62, entered the studio with the same aura of controlled confidence that had intimidated adversaries for 2 decades. Yet there was something subtly different in his facial expression, a blend of paternal pride and personal gratification he seldom displayed in public appearances. The ESPN production crew, comprised of seasoned professionals who had worked with the sport's biggest stars, immediately recognized they were about to witness something singular, adjusting cameras and lighting to capture every nuance of Jordan's facial expression during what promised to be an extraordinary unveiling. The very air in the studio seemed to hum with anticipation, as if everyone present instinctively understood they were on the cusp of a moment that would be recounted and debated for years to come. Jordan, settling into his chair, remarked, "Stephen, I rarely agree to interviews such as this, but there are narratives that demand to be told, and this is unequivocally one of them." Stephen A. retorted with intensity, "Michael, when you agree to come here specifically to discuss Shaq, the entire sports world pauses to heed what you have to impart." As the cameras powered on and the red light signaled they were live to millions of eager viewers worldwide, Stephen A. Smith adopted his characteristic stance as an investigative journalist determined to unearth the truth behind the rumors and conjectures that had dominated sports discussions in recent weeks. Michael Jordan, a living basketball legend and the current owner of the Charlotte Hornets, thank you for joining us today for an interview that promises to shed light on one of the most intriguing mysteries in the current sports world. Stephen A. intoned, his voice imbued with the gravitas he reserved for the most pivotal moments of his journalistic career. "Michael, the entire basketball world has been obsessively discussing the dramatic and seemingly impossible transformation we've witnessed in Shaquille O'Neal over the past few weeks. From a controversial figure who was being universally lambasted and ostracized, he has metamorphosed into an inspiring voice of wisdom and mentorship that is resonating with hearts not just within basketball, but far beyond the sport." Stephen A. leaned slightly forward, fostering an atmosphere of investigative intimacy. "People are speculating about therapy, family interventions, even spiritual awakenings. But the most persistent rumors suggest that you, Michael Jordan, had something to do with this extraordinary metamorphosis. So I must ask you directly, do you have any involvement in this miraculous shift in Shaquille O'Neal?" Stephen A. posed the direct question. "Michael, did you have any hand in this seemingly impossible transformation we've witnessed in Shaquille O'Neal?" Jordan pondered for a moment. "It's time to reveal the full truth. Shaq deserves the world to know the complete story of his courage and vulnerability. Jordan smiled slowly, a genuine smile imbued with an emotion he rarely displayed in public appearances, markedly different from the calculated and controlled grin he typically exhibited during corporate interviews or promotional events related to the Charlotte Hornets. It was a smile that bespoke deep personal satisfaction, paternal pride, and an authentic human connection that transcended any considerations of public image or strategic public relations. Stephen, I'm going to share something with you that very few are privy to, a narrative that will astound you and everyone watching, for it unveils a vulnerability and a resilience rarely witnessed from public figures of Shaquille O'Neal's stature, Jordan stated, his voice adopting a timbre far more intimate and personal than anyone had heard from him in decades of media appearances. Precisely 1 month ago, on a frigid January Tuesday, I was in my Hornets office, scrutinizing financial reports, when I received a call that was utterly unexpected. It was 2:18 in the morning, and upon seeing Shaquille O'Neal displayed on my phone's caller ID, my immediate reaction was one of apprehension, as calls at such an hour seldom herald positive tidings. Jordan paused strategically, allowing the gravity of his words to permeate the viewer's consciousness before proceeding with even greater emotional intensity. When I answered that call, Stephen, on the other end of the line was a man utterly shattered, weeping like a lost child, gravely contemplating forsaking basketball indefinitely. Jordan revealed with escalating intensity, "Stephen, I'm going to tell you something few know. A month ago, I received a call at 2 in the morning. It was Shaq, utterly destroyed emotionally, considering abandoning basketball forever." The studio fell into absolute silence. You could have heard a pin drop as everyone processed the sheer magnitude of the revelation Jordan was making live on national television. The ESPN studio descended into an absolute and reverent silence, akin to a cathedral during a moment of profound prayer, as the production crew, Stephen A. Smith, and millions of viewers worldwide processed the emotional enormity of the revelation Michael Jordan was delivering live on national television. It was the kind of silence that only descended when something truly extraordinary was being unveiled, when the raw humanity of public figures, typically regarded as invincible, was laid bare so candidly and vulnerably that it resonated with something fundamental within the human soul. Jordan continued, his own emotions visibly surfacing for the first time in years of controlled public appearances. That 7 foot 1 inch giant, this man who had dominated basketball courts worldwide for 2 decades, was literally weeping, telling me he believed he had become the villain of the sport he loved more than anything in life. Jordan's voice quivered slightly, betraying the emotional depth of his own memories of that transformative night. "And do you know what I saw beyond the pain, beyond the despair, beyond the self-recrimination that was destroying one of the strongest men I'd ever known? I saw exactly what made him special from the outset. A man who cared so profoundly about basketball, about its integrity, about its impact on people, that he was genuinely willing to sacrifice his own career so as not to harm the sport or the people who looked up to him as an example." Jordan stated with palpable emotion, that 7 foot 1 inch giant was weeping, believing he had become the villain of the sport he loved more than anything. Stephen A. thought, impressed, "In 30 years of sports journalism, I have never heard Michael Jordan speak with such vulnerability and emotional candor about another human being." Michael Jordan's emotions continued to surface with increasing visibility and poignancy, completely shattering the calculated public image of coolness he had meticulously cultivated over decades in public life, revealing layers of humanity and compassion he rarely displayed even to those closest to him. "Stephen, I want you and everyone watching to understand something fundamental about what transpired during those weeks," Jordan said, his voice imbued with an emotional intensity that made every word resonate with absolute authenticity. "I literally spent entire days teaching Shaquille O'Neal everything it took me painful decades to learn about leadership, about effective communication, about how to transform destructive criticism into constructive mentorship that truly helps young athletes grow and evolve." Jordan leaned forward, creating a sense of intimacy even through the television screen. I taught him how to use his massive platform of influence to build dreams instead of destroying them, how to be honest about shortcomings without demolishing the confidence of young individuals trying to find their place in the professional basketball world. The passion in Jordan's voice was undeniable as he continued. Because that is precisely what true legends do, Stephen. They don't just accumulate trophies and personal records, they consciously elevate the next generation. They use their experience and wisdom to illuminate the path for others who are grappling with the same challenges they overcame. Jordan passionately declared, "I spent days teaching him what took me decades to learn, how to transform criticism into constructive mentorship, how to use his platform to build dreams instead of destroying them." The executive continued with conviction, "Because that's what true legends do, Stephen. They elevate the next generation, not just accumulate personal trophies." In that dramatic and utterly unexpected moment, to the absolute astonishment of Stephen A. Smith, the ESPN production team, and millions of live viewers worldwide, Shaquille O'Neal physically appeared in the studio, walking with determination and visible emotion through the side entrance typically reserved for special surprises during live broadcasts. Shaq had secretly flown from Atlanta to Bristol specifically for that moment, discreetly coordinating with ESPN production to create a surprise nobody had anticipated. Not even Michael Jordan, who looked on with genuine surprise and joy at his friend now approaching with determined strides. Shaquille's entrance created an absolutely magical and spontaneous television moment, the kind of convergence of authentic human emotions that could not be planned or rehearsed, unfolding organically as two individuals who had shared a transformative journey reunited on a national stage. Stephen A. Smith, seasoned in navigating live contingencies yet visibly moved by the emotional gravity of the moment, swiftly recalibrated his journalistic approach to accommodate the simultaneous presence of both legends, instinctively recognizing he was bearing witness to something truly historic in the realm of sports television. The production team, showcasing the professional agility that typifies the pinnacle of live television, promptly adjusted cameras and audio to adequately capture the extraordinary energy that now completely permeated the studio. Shaq stated, entering the studio with palpable emotion, "Apologies for the interruption, but when I heard MJ was here recounting our story, I simply had to be present for this moment." Stephen A. responded, clearly moved, "Shaquille O'Neal, what an entrance. This is live television at its purest and most potent. Welcome to the show." Shaquille positioned himself alongside Michael Jordan, his imposing physical presence forging a visually potent image of two generations of basketball greatness united by a shared experience of vulnerability and growth that had transcended their historical differences as competitive rivals. "MJ literally saved my life," Shaq declared, his voice imbued with a raw, unvarnished emotion that brought the entire studio to a respectful hush, everyone recognizing they were witnessing a genuinely transformative moment in television. "And when I say he saved my life, I'm not merely referring to my television career or my public reputation. I'm speaking of my life as a human being, my capacity to look in the mirror and genuinely like the person I see reflected there." Shaq paused, visibly grappling with intense emotions that threatened to utterly overwhelm his ability to speak. "He showed me something I had utterly forgotten during months of self-recrimination and despair, that being vulnerable, admitting when you're wrong, and asking for help when you need it is not a sign of weakness as I had always believed." Shaquille's voice gained strength and conviction as he continued, "It is quite literally the greatest demonstration of strength a human being can exhibit, especially when you are a public figure, constantly observed and judged by millions." The giant looked directly at Jordan with gratitude that transcended words. "Michael Jordan taught me that personal evolution is not a betrayal of who you are. It is the most complete realization of who you always had the potential to become," Shaq declared, his voice thick with emotion. "MJ saved my life, not merely my career, but my life as a human being. He showed me that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength there is." The colossal athlete continued, visibly moved. "He taught me that personal growth isn't a betrayal of your essence, but the most complete actualization of who you always had the potential to become." The interview reached its crescendo when the two basketball titans, Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal, embraced genuinely before ESPN's cameras, creating an image that would be emblazoned on magazine covers, shared across social media platforms, and featured on news programs worldwide for weeks. It was an embrace that spoke not only of reconciliation between two individuals, but also of bridging disparate leadership philosophies, distinct generations of athletes, and varied approaches to navigating the legacy and responsibility inherent in athletic greatness. There was literally not a dry eye in the ESPN studio, as everyone present, from Stephen A. Smith to the most seasoned camera technician, witnessed two of the most potent and influential figures in sports demonstrating that even titans require assistance, affirmation, and human connection to navigate the intricate challenges of public life. The embrace stretched for what felt like an eternity on live television. A moment of eloquent silence that conveyed more about genuine friendship, transformative mentorship, and personal growth than any elaborate discourse could articulate. Stephen A. Smith, acutely aware of the historical significance of the moment, allowed the silence to linger, intuitively grasping that any words would be superfluous and potentially detrimental to the emotional purity of what was unfolding before millions of viewers worldwide. When the two finally parted, both with tears evident in their eyes, the studio remained in respectful silence for several additional seconds, as though all present were processing the profound significance of what they had just witnessed. Jordan, embracing Shaq, declared, "This man possessed the fortitude to solicit assistance when he had hit rock bottom, and that renders him more courageous than any feat he ever accomplished on the hardwood." Shaq, his voice thick with emotion, rejoined, "And this man showed me that true champions are not solely gauged by their triumphs, but by the profound positive impact they effectuate on myriad lives." As the interview finally concluded, after a 45-minute span that, to all involved, had seemingly elapsed in a mere 5, Stephen A. Smith offered his final words with a gravitas and solemnity that perfectly reflected the magnitude of what had transpired in that ESPN studio. "Ladies and gentlemen, in 3 decades of reporting on professional athletics, I have seldom borne witness to anything as profoundly powerful, authentically raw, and unequivocally inspiring as what we have just beheld here today," Stephen A. articulated, his own voice laden with genuine emotion. "We have just been privy to two basketball titans demonstrating that true greatness resides not merely in vanquishing adversaries or amassing accolades, but rather in the profound capacity for human growth and the uplifting of others in the very process." The cameras meticulously captured the concluding moments of Jordan and Shaq, standing shoulder to shoulder, two colossal figures of the sporting world who had just imparted to the world a profound lesson on vulnerability, the essence of mentorship, and the transformative potency of authentic camaraderie that utterly transcended any semblance of competitive rivalry. In the immediate aftermath of the program's conclusion, social media platforms would erupt with an outpouring of fervent emotional responses from admirers, athletes, luminaries, and the general populace who had been profoundly moved by the unvarnished authenticity of what they had borne witness to, thereby generating a profound wave of positivity and inspiration that would resonate and propagate far beyond the confines of the basketball realm. The interview would instantaneously achieve viral status, not merely for its astonishing disclosures, but rather for its potent illustration that even the most accomplished among us occasionally require succor, and that extending such assistance stands as one of the most sublime manifestations of the human spirit. Stephen A. concluded, his voice resonating with deep emotion, "In 3 decades of sports journalism, I have seldom witnessed anything as compelling as two legends exemplifying that true greatness inherently encompasses growth as human beings." Jordan and Shaq mused in unison, "Mission accomplished. We demonstrated to the world that even giants can continue to evolve, and that soliciting assistance is the most courageous act of all." A year following that landmark ESPN interview, which had resonated with millions worldwide, Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal stood side by side on a sun-drenched Saturday morning in Charlotte, poised for the official inauguration of their most ambitious and profoundly significant joint endeavor, the Jordan O'Neal Youth Development Center. This impressive complex, strategically erected on a 5-acre plot within the heart of Charlotte's most underserved community, transcended the typical focus on basketball common to many traditional sports centers. Instead, it embodied a revolutionary holistic vision, meticulously centered on quality education, readily accessible mental health care, robust character development, and, pivotally, on instilling in young people the profound understanding that transient failures do not dictate permanent destinies. The state-of-the-art facilities encompass cutting-edge basketball courts, classrooms outfitted with advanced technology, dedicated spaces for psychological counseling, a comprehensive community library, and even an industrial-grade kitchen where young people would acquire culinary proficiencies that could readily translate into viable future careers. Hundreds of children and adolescents from the local community, accompanied by their parents and guardians, had converged on that momentous morning, not solely to celebrate the inauguration of a community center, but rather the genesis of a palpable symbol of hope and transformation, one that had fortuitously emerged from the improbable camaraderie between two basketball legends. Jordan remarked, his gaze sweeping over the throng, "Just look at this, Shaq. A mere year ago, you were contemplating forsaking everything, and now here we stand, fundamentally altering lives." Shaq, visibly moved, countered, "Oftentimes the most profound blessings spring forth from our darkest moments. Wouldn't you agree?" Michael Jordan then positioned himself before the main microphone, centrally installed on the primary court, his mere presence still commanding instantaneous attention and deference despite a setting so disparate from the hallowed NBA arenas where he had meticulously forged his legend. He proceeded to address the hundreds of young people present with the identical, laser-like intensity he had once deployed to galvanize teammates during the most crucial junctures of playoff competition. "You all know precisely why we are gathered here today, standing in this special place that signifies far more than mere courts and modern facilities?" inquired Jordan, his voice imbued with an inherent authority that commanded the full attention of even the most restless children. "We are here because both of us have learned a fundamental lesson that we wish to impart to each and every one of you. A lesson that can utterly transform the trajectory of your lives if you truly grasp and apply it. Never under any circumstances is it too late to grow, to evolve, and to become a better version of who you are today." Jordan gestured towards Shaquille, forging a visual connection between them that was palpable to the entire audience. "Just over a year ago, my friend here was at the lowest ebb of his adult life, contemplating abandoning everything he cherished because he believed he had become a detrimental influence in the world. Today, he stands beside me as living testament that genuine transformation is attainable when we possess the courage to seek assistance and embrace the understanding that personal growth is a continuous process, not a final destination." Jordan passionately declared, "We are present today because we have absorbed a fundamental truth. It is never too late to cultivate growth and evolve into an improved version of yourselves." The executive continued with inspiring eloquence. "This center stands as a testament to the fact that authentic transformation is achievable when one possesses the fortitude to seek aid and accept that growth itself is an ongoing journey." Shaquille approached the microphone with resolute steps, his physical presence still imposing and awe-inspiring to the children encountering him in person for the first time, yet now imbued with a profound emotional wisdom and a genuine humility that only stems from lived pain, hard-won triumph, and the complete embrace of one's own human vulnerabilities. "Children and young people gathered here today, I wish to share something deeply personal with you," Shaq stated, his voice adopting a paternal and approachable tone that dramatically contrasted with the controversial image he had projected just a year prior. "I nearly completely abandoned what I cherish most in life: basketball, the opportunity to inspire young people like yourselves, the chance to leverage my platform to affect positive change in the world. All because I was terribly afraid of not being perfect, of making mistakes, of disappointing those who looked up to me as an exemplar." Shaq gestured directly towards Jordan with a profound sense of gratitude. "But my brother here, this extraordinary man who was once my fierce rival on the court, taught me the most crucial lesson of my adult life. Our responsibility as human beings is not to be flawless in everything we undertake, for that is literally impossible. Our responsibility is to consciously strive to be better today than we were yesterday and to help others do the same. Shaq spoke with poignant vulnerability. Kids, I almost gave up on what I love most in life because I was afraid of not being perfect. But my brother here taught me that our responsibility isn't to be perfect. The giant continued sagely, our responsibility is to be better today than we were yesterday and to help others do the same. In this special moment of intergenerational connection, a 12-year-old girl with colorful braids and eyes gleaming with genuine curiosity courageously raised her hand, creating a spontaneous moment that none of the organizers had planned. Yet it would become the emotional heart of the entire inaugural ceremony. Mr. Shaq, I have a question my mom said I could ask if I was brave enough, the girl stated in a clear voice, imbued with the straightforward honesty only children possess. How did you two manage to become true friends if you used to be rivals competing against each other? My mom said you used to face off in games and it was like a war. The innocent yet profound question created a moment of reflective silence in the center, as hundreds of people awaited a response that could potentially reveal something fundamental about reconciliation, forgiveness, and the evolution of human relationships. Shaq and Jordan exchanged a deeply meaningful glance, a silent communication that spoke of shared journeys, pain overcome together, and a friendship forged not despite their differences, but owing to the mutual vulnerability they had shared during the most challenging moments of their post-career lives. The young girl innocently inquired, Mr. Shaq, how did you forge a friendship when you were once fierce rivals, clashing as if in a war? Jordan and Shaq exchanged a knowing look. This child has just posed the question that encapsulates the essence of our entire transformative journey. Michael Jordan leaned slightly towards the microphone, his facial expression softening as he processed the profound depth of the child's query, which had struck directly at the core of his personal transformation and the extraordinary friendship he had cultivated with Shaquille. That is an absolutely brilliant question, young one, Jordan remarked, addressing the girl directly with a genuine smile that illuminated his habitually serious countenance. And the answer will surprise you, just as it surprised both of us when we finally grasped the truth. Jordan swept a hand to encompass both Shaq and the entire audience in the discourse. We discovered something revolutionary that completely altered our perspective on competition, rivalry, and human relationships. Our true competition was never truly against each other, even when we were facing off in the NBA Finals and giving our absolute all to win. He paused strategically, allowing his words to fully resonate with the young girl's mind and with everyone present. Our true battle was always against our own personal limitations, our internal fears, our own resistance to growth and change. When we realized this, we understood that we could be allies in this more significant battle rather than adversaries in a superficial competition. It was against our own limitations, our internal fears, the executive wisely continued. When we realized this, we understood that we could be allies in this more significant battle rather than adversaries in a superficial competition. Shaquille reclaimed the microphone, his voice imbued with a paternal tenderness that beautifully contrasted with his imposing physical stature. As he addressed not only the inquisitive young girl, but also all the young individuals present who represented the future that he and Jordan were endeavoring to positively influence through that transformative project. And sometimes, little one, you need someone who has been through exactly what you're experiencing to show you that it's possible to emerge on the other side stronger, wiser, and better equipped to help others who will face similar challenges, Shaq said, his voice imbued with the authority of lived experience and hard-won triumph. When I was in the darkest moment of my life, believing I had become a terrible person who only knew how to hurt others, Michael didn't judge me or abandon me as I deserved. He extended a hand, shared his own pain and his own scars, and showed me that people can change, grow, and become better versions of themselves. Shaq looked directly at the girl, forging a personal connection that the entire audience could feel. So the answer to your question is this. We became friends because we discovered that our friendship could be more powerful than our rivalry, that our mutual support could create more positive impact in the world than our individual competition ever could. Shaq responded poignantly, "Sometimes you need someone who has been through what you're experiencing to show you that it's possible to emerge stronger on the other side." The giant concluded inspiringly, "We discovered that our friendship could be more powerful than our rivalry, that our mutual support could create more positive impact than our individual competition." As the sun slowly began to set over Charlotte, casting a magical golden light that bathed the entire youth center complex in an almost cinematic ambiance, Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal positioned themselves side by side on one of the second-floor balconies of the main building, observing with profound satisfaction the hundreds of young people now playing, learning, and connecting on the courts and in the educational spaces they had jointly created. The sound of children's laughter, basketballs bouncing on the asphalt, and lively conversations permeated the afternoon air, creating a symphony of joy and hope that perfectly embodied the vision they had conceived when they decided to transform their personal friendship into a force for positive social change. Jordan observed a group of teenagers helping younger children with basketball fundamentals, naturally replicating the mentorship cycle that he and Shaq were striving to institutionalize through the center. "Look at that, Diesel," Jordan said, pointing to the poignant scene unfolding on the courts below. "A year ago, you were convinced your sole talent was for crushing dreams, and now we're watching hundreds of young people live out their dreams in this place we built together." Shaq nodded silently, visibly moved by the sheer magnitude of the transformation that had transpired not only in his personal life, but also in the palpable impact they could now have on the community. Jordan, in a contemplative tone, reiterated, "A year ago, you were convinced your sole talent was for crushing dreams, and now we're watching hundreds of young people live out their dreams in this place we built together." Shaq, with heartfelt gratitude, replied, "It's truly astonishing how the darkest moments of our lives can transmute into the most luminous blessings for others." The two basketball legends remained in pensive silence for several minutes, both processing the extraordinary journey that had led them from that desperate phone call on a frigid January dawn to this moment of profound fulfillment and renewed purpose on a golden autumn afternoon. They had learned through painful yet transformative experience that a person's true legacy is not measured by the resplendent trophies on the shelf, the impressive records in the history books, or the global renown they had amassed during their spectacular athletic careers. A true and enduring legacy resides in the lives one positively impacts, in the individuals one uplifts when they are most in need, in the courage to acknowledge one's own shortcomings and leverage those experiences to help others circumvent similar pitfalls, and, above all, in the humility to recognize that even the most formidable giants occasionally require a helping hand to rise after a fall. That desperate pre-dawn call, which had begun as a cry for help from a shattered man, had evolved into something far greater and more profoundly meaningful. A living lesson that true greatness lies not in never falling or failing, but in how one utilizes one's stumbles to learn, to grow, and crucially, in how one extends a hand to assist others grappling with their own internal struggles. As they watched the children continue to play, even as dusk settled, both knew that this center represented far more than merely a successful philanthropic endeavor. It was the physical embodiment of a life philosophy they had discovered together, that shared vulnerability forges stronger bonds than any individual triumph, that genuine mentorship transcends generations and past rivalries, and that sometimes the darkest moments of our lives are precisely what we need to find our true calling. The echo of youthful laughter resonating through the center's facilities would forever be the soundtrack of their mutual redemption, daily reminding them that the greatest achievement of their lives had not transpired on an NBA court, but within that hallowed space where hope and transformation became a tangible reality. Jordan mused profoundly. "We discovered that true legacy is not found in trophies on a shelf, but in the lives we touch and the people we uplift." Shaq sagaciously concluded, "That desperate call in the pre-dawn hours transformed into the greatest lesson of our lives. True greatness is about how we help others to rise." If Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal's journey resonated with you, be sure to subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and immediately uncover the next captivating story we've curated just for you. Until next time, And before you go, please share in the comments where you're tuning in from and let us know. What were your thoughts on the culmination of this particular narrative?